on to the other story which has dominated the front pages. That's the rugby yesterday. 57-15, England beating Ireland. We have everyone Kieran O'Rahillig, 2 Kierans here, this is the joy of this. Kieran O'Rahillig, from Stephen Jones to Peter O'Reilly to Neil Francis to Brendan Fanning, all talking about the game. Different spectrum of worry depending on who you're reading. Where are we?
Well, Gordon Darcy asked during the week, said we need a shine this Saturday.
He really set it up, didn't he?
I think he got it. Yeah, sorry, Gordon. I don't think it's the one you were hoping for. But looking at let's just look at the score first. I know Joe always says it's a performance-driven squad. They're all about process and not score lines. But there's only 4 times in history has any team put more points than this on Ireland, and they're all New Zealand. And on top of that, I just had a look back at the results since Joe come in. 3 of his worst ever results, 2 have come this year. 2 of the worst 3 results. And the other one is Ireland-Argentina in the World Cup quarter-final. Right. So that's the 3 worst results he's had. And if we go back and we include the defeat in Wales earlier this year as well, 3 of the 7 worst results since Joe came has been this year. So if you're looking for any sort of pattern or to suggest, let's not get carried away, let's not stress, let's say it's this, it's that. If you have 3 of the 7 worst results of, it's 6 years, in one period of, February to August, you'd have to suggest there's something wrong there. The fact that it follows on from last year's, Annus Mirabilis is probably not too surprising either. And it questions a lot of things. You can't become that bad a team technically. So I'd suggest it has to be top 2 inches. It really has to be. Look at what Joe's done. Look at what he's achieved, in France, in Leinster, in Ireland. To do all of that, to get where they did last year, to win what they did. I mean, they've done things that they've never done before under Joe. So we can't write that off. We can't say last year counted for nothing because it was unprecedented. It was something special. And it was at the time, and we embraced it at the time. Some people might have thought more of it. There was, I sat there when Steve Hansen was asked, are Ireland now favourites for the World Cup? It's a bit of a jokey question. We all know that, because anything can happen in 12 months. But it was merited to some degree. You can't say it wasn't, even just looking at results now or looking at the defeat to England. But you have to, at the same time, say that something has seriously gone wrong. Joe Schmidt said they were broken after the England defeat in February. To me, that came across as a mental breakage, not physically, right? Even though they were bullied. But now we're at the stage, it's a Humpty Dumpty stage. They're not broken, they're battered, they're smashed up in pieces. And how he's going to put them together in 4 weeks, it's got to be the biggest challenge of his career. It really does.
Yeah, well, one of the things...
Who do you want to go to? Because I want to give people a sense of what the papers are saying.
I'll go to Peter O'Reilly first of all, but just a very quick one, and before we just get to the specifics of what he's saying. I covered the 2007 World Cup, and I heard the interview with Brian O'Driscoll and Ron O'Gara when they were in here a few weeks ago, talking about that and what went wrong. And it struck me, a lot of the players in that time have written books, and Eddie O'Sullivan's written a book, and I listened to that interview and I've listened to other interviews. Nobody really knows still. I get that impression. They don't really know what happened. And I have a feeling that's the sense within that camp now, that they've gone, because it's not just these warm-ups, like with the Six Nations as well, obviously, that they've gone from such a high and suddenly we're floundering and nobody can put their finger on what's happened. And I think that's very dangerous because it reminds me in a way of the boxers at Rio, that once it started, with Billy Walsh leave and then Michael O'Reilly's failed drugs test, etc., that you still thought, Joe Ward will still win, or Michael Conlon, or Katie Taylor. But there just seemed to be momentum going, the wrong kind of momentum, that just everything was falling apart. And I think it's going to be quite difficult to lift it. And you wouldn't write them off, because you do look at the group and think, you probably still win your group. And then in a once-off game, when they have everybody back, that Ireland team has the talent to beat South Africa, the All Blacks, but you wouldn't be betting on it. And Peter O'Reilly is focused in on one specific issue, is Rory Best. Yeah. Because he's the captain. And he came under pressure yesterday and his throwing cracked, and it's not the first time it's happened. And what does he do? Because his number 2, Sean Cronin, has his issues with that part of the game as well. And outside of that, you've got guys who've rarely been playing for their provinces. So
Peter writes, Rob Herring was excellent on that tour, but he's had limited opportunities to play big games for Ulster because Best has been in his way. Niall Scannell, also a revelation in Australia, but he didn't have the sort of season he needed to have with Munster. And then, as you mentioned, Sean Cronin has his own set-piece issues. He writes, O'Reilly, both coach and captain are on their final lap with Ireland. The idea clearly was they would complete their last lap together, but now 2 weeks after Best's 37th birthday, that pressure's growing. As Schmidt knows, Best starts are becoming a liability. He knows that other teams will go after his hooker, as England did here. And then he says, recall that line out in Ireland's 22 just before half-time in the Six Nations opener. George Cruz and co. denied him an easy out. We recall the wonky trajectory, the imperfect spiral of a player who had lost confidence in his fingertips. The same pressure was applied yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's a conundrum. His guess, by the way, O'Reilly's guess at the end, because of the other options, is that Schmidt will place his faith in Best and just hope for the best, no pun intended, starting in Cardiff, and use these warm-up games to try and get him up to speed.
Yeah.
It's one of several issues. Looking at Stephen Jones' player ratings, Bundy Aki, 4 out of 10. He says, despite his try, just not up to it at this level. Jacob Stockdale, he gives a 4 out of 10. Panic defence, costly. Ross Byrne, he gives a 7 out of 10. One of the best marks for an Irish player. A newcomer at least, but kept his composure. Jean Klein, unimpressive, he says. A South African lock he may be, but not a Springbok. Devon Toner needed. Peter O'Mahony gets a 4. CJ Stander gets a 4, just not at the races. Ireland must make long overdue change. So the Sunday Times doesn't make pleasant reading.
Well, the difference in tally there, 80 out of 150 compared to 117 out of 150, like you'd rarely see that discrepancy between two
ratings,
tier one teams. It's like that saying where you can't win a title at the start of the season, but you can lose it. And I think some players aren't playing themselves into the World Cup squad, but they're playing themselves out. I don't quite know who will go out, because it's hard to figure out sometimes Joe Schmidt's thinking on this. I mean, I was surprised Klein got such a showing, but he didn't really do enough again. We're talking about him being brought in for that heft, for that, abnormal size for an Irishman anyhow. And, some people aren't too happy the way he's been parachuted in either. That's for probably another day, or you've probably done it too many times at this stage.
Yeah.
But
Schmidt did make the point that it is difficult for any individual when things are going so badly wrong all around them to do well. And you could apply that to any one individual when you're talking about each person, just on their own 80 minutes.
But if too many of them aren't helping the one beside them, at some stage, the shoe has to fall and you have to question them.
But I think the best situation is particularly interesting because he's 37, he is the captain. He's not just gone into his last World Cup, he's gone into his last couple of games as a professional. He's had the emotion of his final farewell at Ravenhill, which they made a big deal of, his final farewell at the Aviva, and or the Six Nations farewell at the Aviva, and they had one for him at Twickenham. He was asked after the game yesterday, this is your last game at Twickenham, how do you feel? So he's got all this pressure at the end of his career, and he's also expected to be the leader of this team with greater expectation on their shoulders than any Ireland rugby team ever before. Now, Brendan Fanning has a really good piece in the Sunday Independent on this, and he brings up the expectation. He said, expectation and how to deal with it has always been an issue in Irish rugby. In 2001, Eddie O'Sullivan decided to treat it as more friend than foe when going to Murrayfield, knowing it could go horribly wrong. It went horribly wrong. The same coach could write a book, and not just a chapter in a book, about how it can eat away confidence when those outside the camp want sun, moon and stars, while those inside it know the preparation won't deliver it. Yeah. Which indicates, that... inside the camp, the doubts do come in. People are starting to think, and there's little leaks coming. Peter O'Reilly's a line there that Jonathan Sexton got injured in training, which wasn't made public. A ruck collapsed on him. He'll probably miss next week's game. So.
Oh yeah, that's in Peter's piece. Yeah, that hasn't been mentioned. Strangely, it hasn't been picked up.
I'm surprised that wasn't almost a big headline.
Oh yeah,
I'm surprised he didn't break it out.
I mean, especially considering what's up with Joey Carberry. The lack of time Byrne and Carty have not had. I mean, that's huge news.
So a ruck fell on Sexton,
news.
the side of Sexton's leg, and he's probably going to miss the next game for sure anyway.
Well, that's what Peters understood, and I mean, not a lot comes out of that Ireland camp that would be, let's say, necessarily accurate at times. And Carberry could be 4 or 6 weeks. Who's to say Johnny's not, another 3 or 4 weeks as well. We'll know when the squad's announced, obviously. And Joe will have to tell us a bit more about it this week, but that's huge news.
When you go back to last year, Joe Schmidt got World Coach of the Year, and he deserved it. Jonathan Sexton got World Rugby Player of the Year, and he deserved it. Ireland got huge amount of applause, and they deserved it. They were brilliant in 2018. We shouldn't forget that. But, there is thing that's will be thrown out there that Ireland were hyped up too much, and they didn't really achieve anything last year. You do hear people saying that they did really well last year. But this is a different year, and it's a World Cup year, and this year so far, Would you give him 4 out of 10? You know, at
That'd
a
be
push.
kind.
In the,
Yeah, well, Stephen Jones
strong.
touches on that. He says less than 18 months since Ireland thrashed England to win a Grand Slam. How could we ever know that come the end of August 2019 we'd be wondering how much credit to give for this massive England win, bearing in mind the paucity of the Irish opposition? I mean,
No, it's an incredible turnaround.
it's a remarkable turnaround, but we've seen that from 3 or 4 teams, haven't we?
Yeah, Neil Francis writes, an explanation is of little value. So he didn't wait around to see the Schmidt interview afterwards.
I just want to know why he's watching Mary Poppins, by the way.
He watched Mary Poppins
Can you
prior to
find that out?
kick-off. Yeah, we'll ask him. He was watching Mary Poppins, then he watched the match.
To guarantee some sort of sugar boost for the day, is it?
Maybe. Mary Poppins doesn't give explanations was his link, and he didn't wait around for the Joe Schmidt one. But he does say what bothered him almost the most is that Ireland went out yesterday probably knowing they wouldn't win under the circumstances because England have had the extra game. But he said Ireland lacked the right attitude. They showed no courage in their performance, something I haven't seen in a long time from an Irish side under Joe Schmidt. It set a dangerous precedent a month out from a World Cup adventure. Almost this, you don't want to say they threw in the towel, but that they got so loose, he said, set a dangerous precedent. And he, I guess similar to your point, Kieran, he says the difficulty here is that you can also fail to recover yourselves. A performance like that can stall everything, and all momentum and enthusiasm can die on the vine, is the kind of scary thought. He talks about England then in pretty glowing terms, you know. Billy Vunipola, best number 8 in the world. He loved Curry and Underhill. He says our back row, in stark contrast, seems to have no cohesion, dynamism or flair. The only Irish player, he said, with the remotest chance of being selected in English back row is Dan Levy, and obviously he's out injured.
But you've got these back-to-back games with Wales now, and we know how physical and they can be, and there's a bit of needle and niggle between the two countries. And you really wonder what kind of shape you'd be like at the end of them, because, you know, Conor Murray did have to go off injured yesterday.
Yeah.
Cian Healy picked up an ankle injury, and as Brendan Fanning points out, he had a history of ankle problems. Joey Carberry got injured in the first warm-up game. You'll be very, very lucky not to lose a player or two over those 2 games.
And what about the argument, just to play devil's advocate for a second, okay, come 50 minutes, the bench is emptied, the game is an irrelevance then in some respects. It's, you know, the Irish players still on probably are just dying because they're not as fit as they need to be, and it's a very messy situation when you have that many substitutions. And, you know, England are feeling good about life, their tails are up, it was a very strong England side. They're a bloody good side anyway, like they could well win the thing. They're at Twickenham, the sun is shining, they got a bit of momentum. You know, really, the scoreline is an irrelevance. It was a friendly, like it's the closest thing we see to a friendly, and it's Ireland's second game. It's the first game for the vast, vast majority of
and
those
there's a couple
players.
of people that point out that Ireland are 2 weeks behind England.
So, like, are we not getting? Are we not going way over the top here?
That's one possible defence I'd make as well, that they've come back from, on Thursday, come back from a 10-day warm weather training camp when I would think they did serious hard work. So they might have been a bit out on their feet, so we might be able to learn more from the Wales games.
Yeah.
You know, like, so that for that reason, I would withhold judgment on them. But it did look concerning. Nobody could.
Okay, concerning we'll agree on.
Yeah, but they are coming back from and they looked wrecked from early on.
Yeah.
Like, so you'd wonder, did they train really, really hard?
It's like a league match where the GA lads trained the day before. That's what was going on.
Yeah, and it was very hot in London, as it's been pointed out, really, really hot.
Kieran, you've obviously covered rugby for years and are very au fait with it all. How worried are you based on yesterday?
Well, just to jump on the heavy-legged bit, this is the first game of the season for a lot of these players, so you will expect a certain rustiness. But we spoke to Peter O'Mahony a few weeks ago, who was out in Portugal at the training camp, and before that, and he said it's been one of the hardest pre-seasons. Now, he said he didn't know if that was him getting older or, you know, joking. Yeah. But he said there was a lot more running. We pushed him on it, and he said there was a more 200-metre run. So maybe for a back rower, more running is different to how the rest of us might say it. But he said a lot of it was very scientific. It's very scientific, and you'd expect that from Joe. You'd expect it from the backroom team. You'd expect it from 2019. Just everything would be focused. Player loads. You know, they have Kitman Labs coming in assessing everything. Why would you accept this game against England, knowing that you're 2 weeks behind, knowing their schedule, knowing your guys are only going in with the potential for such negativity to come out of it? I mean, we spoke to Will Greenwood earlier this year, you know, when they bring guys over from England ahead of the World Cup. Sorry, Lawrence Delalio, excuse me. And he said you wouldn't want to be losing more than one game in the year of a World Cup. He said if you're losing more than one, it's going to get into your head, it's going to affect everything else. And I mean, we talk about winning being a good habit, right? And then players come out and say, you learn more from a defeat. You know, if you really want to learn that more, why are we not just all losing for the crack? So, you know, I mean, there's a tipping point here where a defeat like this is really, really negative.
Could Could the answer to the sports science point be that the 22nd of September is still a good while away, and this team are trying to peak physically
Absolutely,
for
yeah.
3-4 weeks after that? It would actually be impossible. If they arrive now fully tuned and peak physical fitness, they wouldn't be able to maintain that for the next 2 months. Like, if it's that scientific, I'm sure
Can
they
it
could
be?
almost, well, I wonder, put it this
Well, I
way,
think
I'd
it
say,
can
it's,
be,
I'd say it's scientific enough that they can aim to peak closer to the 22nd of September than the 22nd of August.
Yeah. Well,
I would think they're still 3-4
Why are they
weeks
playing
away.
4 games then? As well, there's a question about that. Why are they doing it in the structure they're doing it? If this will all be
This is about bringing them
confirmation
on.
bias, I think.
Yeah, no, sure. But I guess isn't the point of playing these games to bring them up to speed that
Sure,
they're not going to be at?
absolutely.
So-
And the fact is, your toughest group game is your first game. So they do need some warm-up games. You couldn't go in with just training under your belt. But you can, like this training program that Joe Schmidt has put in place will have been planned for over the last year, 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah.
And you do look at, like, I remember reading before about Pep Guardiola when he was at Barcelona, and there would always be 2 peaks planned. One was kind of late March, early April, and one was earlier in the season. But they aim to kind of finish the season really strongly, just hitting their peak form. So I would expect this is calibrated, like Dublin footballers next week. I would say their whole season, even though they say it's 1 game at a time, it's been calibrated to peak on that Sunday. So we'll see. We'll see in 4 weeks' time. We'll know then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I mean, yeah, you can take it in exception, on its own.
Oh, no, of course, but
because
you're
of the
taking
Six Nations.
but you put it in the context of the year, which has been, as I say, 4 out of 10 is pushing it. You might give it 3 out of 10 for this
Yeah.
year. It's been
And do
really
you think
poor.
they took the Six Nations as seriously as they did in 2018?
Well, again, like Joe always. I read this. I was listening to this great podcast. Sorry, I'm going to digress a little
Go
bit. During the week, Eric Weinstein, he's a bit mathematician, kind of economist theorist, and he has.
We'll check you out, O'Reilly.
He had.
And did you stumble on this by accident, or what
No,
happened?
he's an interesting character. So it was a good chat with another professor of economics over there, and they're talking about a new theory of preference falsification.
Right.
So what you say publicly will be different to what you really strongly hold inside. So if it can be benign. I can be here and I say the place looks great, and I can go outside. Shit. Oh,
And why did you choose that example?
Just context,
Right,
just because we're here. It could be in somebody's house. Your living room is lovely. I love the decor.
Yeah.
And it's benign.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Until they buy you something for Christmas and you wish you hadn't said it. But it becomes more dangerous when we're, let's say polling in Brexit and Trump. Yeah. People weren't willing to publicly say
How they felt.
what they were thinking.
Sure,
It
yeah.
could be really dangerous. In sports, we see this a lot. It doesn't come out till years later. You said it there. Books are written, and we get a bit more of the truth, and we get an understanding of what was
Happening.
meaningful at the time, what they really thought. This is a long way round of saying Joe will tell us he's focused. Six Nations is really big. It's very important. It's always big. We can't possibly sidetrack it with a long-term view. Like that 3D chess concept. People said Trump is playing 3D chess, and an advisor said he's actually eating up chess pieces. I think we're getting a little bit too into this kind of thought that we can focus on this or not, and prioritise something 6 months away. We don't have enough players really to do that. Joe has to keep them going, has to keep them ticking over. And I think, is that Andy Dunn saying, I don't believe that they're holding back all these, I think a lot of things went really right last year.
Yeah.
A lot of things. We hit a really good run of form. I look back on the England game. Tuilagi didn't play that day. I mean, look how destructive he's been since he came back in. Billy Vunipola didn't play that day.
They were a different team.
Different team.
Ireland were going for a Grand Slam. It's all different.
Yeah. A lot of things went right. And then we kept that going, kept the spirit going, kept the optimism. People were openly saying we thought we'd beat the All Blacks. Something that's
But
unprecedented.
Johnny Sexton was fit all the time,
Yeah.
more or less, which he hasn't been this year.
Andy Dunn's contention would be that the game plan was so taxing and took such a toll on the players, they just have reached the end of it being really, something they can deliver.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's, again, this is what I'm saying, they won't say it, and it's not for players to come out and give us their honest opinion, really.
No.
They have to trick themselves. Quite often, the elite athletes will have to trick themselves into thinking the positive stuff. So we're here to sit in the middle and try and analyse it coldly. That's not their job. So we shouldn't expect that from them,
No.
nor from the coach.
No.
But there might be a lack of confidence in the system. There might be a lack of trust that what worked for so well and what stood us so well won't do it anymore.
Well, confidence is based on evidence, and the Six Nations would have challenged that confidence.
Absolutely.
And that
I
is-
mean, they're broken. I was surprised Joe even said that. They were broken. We asked a few of the players and they weren't able to fully fill us in. they didn't say it, firstly. He says they said it or they felt it. But they weren't able to bite on it and give us more. But there's clearly doubts. And it is a friendly.
Yes.
It is X, Y, Z, you know, all these kind of caveats. But that result is damaging. It has to be. Just to jump in, Stuart Barnes, who's brilliant, really. I love listening to him on here as well. He said, you know, he's questioning the value of the Grand Slam wins and that. He said, lovely, magical memories and all that, but all that counts is Japan. Would Ireland, Wales and England sacrifice those Grand Slams to make the semi-finals? And then he goes on to something that's really fascinating. He says, this cycle of World Cup cycle, he says, like, cut it down. He says, much of the... You could make a manager into a genius and write the book about the 4-year plan behind the glory, but that's coach nonsense. Much, if not most, of the work required didn't begin until this summer. That's why these warm-up matches are so important. So he says, you know, it's rotten luck for the injured players, great news for the coffers, and imperative for the 4-year plans that are in reality condensed into a much tighter time frame. Make it the 4-month plan.
Okay. Well, on that point, we're going to leave the rugby, and News Talk listeners, we are going to hand you over to Stephen Doyle and Harry Arter. They are at the Vitality Stadium, so short ad break, and then Stephen is going to pick up with live commentary of our first game of the afternoon. Man City away to Bournemouth. We'll also bring you Spurs against Newcastle later on. Myself and Kieran O'Rahillig and Kieran Cunningham are going to stay on all our social channels and finish out the papers. Lots of other good pieces worth getting to, and you can download the full thing as well if you're not able to join us on Twitter or Facebook Live or Periscope. So, short break on News Talk. We're going to continue the papers here.
Got a lot of good stuff.
And like that, we can continue. There we are. You were just saying we left out a lot of good stuff we didn't get to. I know.
Where we go?
I meant on the rugby side. Just to throw in a sentence then. So there's a couple of good pieces. And they both look at 1995, which, you know, these features will come out. I'll probably write a few of them myself, looking back in time. So in the Daily Mail, Irish Daily Mail, so they've got Hugh Farrelly does a piece with Terry Kingston, and in the Sunday Times you've got Peter O'Reilly doing a piece with Gary Halpin. They're both looking at the same time, same games, and it's great. There's great nuggets. There really is. I mean, especially Gary Halpin, you know, against the All Blacks, runs away after scoring, like, you know, does the gun salute fingers and winds them up, and Jonah Loman comes out and goes, "Yeah, you're going to regret that." But
he gave
young Jonah Loman.
Sean Fitzpatrick, wasn't it, who he said was a wind-up merchant himself?
Yeah, seems to be. Yeah.
It was also interesting in that piece in the Sunday Times how inadequate the physical preparation was. Like even dealing with altitude, they just made a complete mess of it.
That's the bit I've highlighted there.
Well, let's just get the end of the amateur era. Roughly, 95 was the change. Wasn't
They got the right advice though. They were told if you're coming down from altitude, don't come down 2 days before, come down the day before, play the match. He says, well, our lads said, it'd just be handier to come down 2 days before. They feel great in training the next day, which should have been match day, and then the next day, match day, they're absolutely dead on their feet.
It's funny because it's just slightly tied into that. I remember that year, Donegal, that was the old knockout football championship, and Donegal had knocked out Down in the first round, who were the reigning champions, and Donegal were installed as one of the All-Ireland favourites. And they played Monaghan in the next round at home in Balbafay. And 2 hours before the game, they all went into a hotel bar, lounge bar, to watch the All Blacks take on England. Right. With Jonah Lomu's hat-trick. Because Lomu had been such a star of that World Cup. This was 2 hours before the game. And they ended up losing by 9 points to Monaghan at home. So you're talking about the lack of professionalism was everywhere back then, even in amateur sports. So.
Should have had headphones on.
Even yesterday, this is the level of preparation and paranoia they take it to. England arrived deliberately late for the game because they wanted to test what would they do if there's traffic in Japan. Well, by the way, like, they apologise if a train is 1 second late. Like, I think it'll be okay. But they wanted to put the players under pressure. If we arrive late to a match, how do we cope?
They have to be one of the favourites now. Like we hardly mentioned England really there, but they have to be. They're a top team. They're a really top class team.
Well, they finished 5th last year, wasn't it? Like they lost 3 games in the Six Nations.
Yeah, they were brutal. They looked completely lost. Like Eddie Jones was under pressure for his job. There was the Tour de South Africa. It was like a saviour job, kind of a feeling about the whole thing. Can we squeeze in a coach this soon, close to the World Cup? Was almost the talk.
Yeah. And they brought in a couple of new ones already as well.
Not to oversimplify things, you throw back into Tuilagi, Vunipola, the big lads. Like rugby changes very quickly.
Incredible. Yeah. Well, look at the box. I mean, it's one of the stories of the year. 60-0 last year against New Zealand. And then they beat them twice since and looked really, really good.
I always remember talking to a former Munster player, and this was about 18 months ago, give or take, and I was like, who do you really want, are you looking at in the World Cup? And he said, South Africa. And the whole room kind of Yeah.
Just before Razzie got the job, or
It was around the time he'd just taken it.
Yeah.
And he said 2 words, Razzie Erasmus, wait and you see everyone.
yeah. And Jacques, I mean, the defense
yeah,
coach,
Niembar, yeah. Seems to be doing a phenomenal job.
phenomenal. Yeah, incredible. The players speak about him like it's like they're talking about their mother or something. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
So, look, that's the rugby. There's loads in the rugby, as you can imagine. We should get on to other things. So,